We measure by the iPad. We use the Measure app, and then we bring it into the system so that it's always here marked with the measurements. Okay, so if Jeff does the measures, then when he brings them into us, we scan them in so that we always have them to reference to. And if he gets to install and has a problem, we're looking at the same thing that he's looking at. And this is where all of our model home panels are made. Because we do the model home panels, different system than we do custom panels. We try to, most of the time, Nancy tries to have everything up front ready for him with the hardware if we have it in-house.
What has happened is this particular builder has sold this model, and they are putting a brand new model at the entrance to the subdivision. So we're moving everything, furniture, window treatments, to the new model, which will be decorated exactly the same. One of the things that we're being very careful of is to make sure that we are putting labels on each one of the treatments, as well as we have labeled every one of the rods so far that we have taken down. Because this is a model that they are selling, they will be retouching up and repainting, so we don't need to fill the holes in on this one. And this is the height measurement so that we know what to put the window treatments back up at the new model.
102 and a quarter.
102 and a quarter. Sweep of the house, make sure we did not miss any windows or any corners. As you can see, we do package all of the treatments up to be able to transport them to the new model home, just so that the fact that we can't get them dirty, they don't get wet in the rain.
Hi, I'm Celia DeGuglielmo, librarian at the Curtains and Soft Furnishings Resource Library. As a Pro Plus member of the library, you can watch this video advertisement-free and talk to industry professionals in our online forum. Visit the library to learn more about starting or growing a business using your creative sewing skills. See you at the library. This new model that we're at is in the same subdivision. The builder has sold the old model, and this is the new section of the subdivision that they're going to be developing. So this is a new house that they built. It's the exact same floor plan
of the model we were just at, taking all the window treatments down. We'll be putting the window treatments back up in here, the exact same positioning, the exact same heights. And then next week, the movers will come in and take all the furniture and carpets from the old model and be moving it over to the new model. I use a blue painter's tape. It leaves less residue. What I prefer is a tool belt. I don't like large, heavy tool belts. So I just have a couple of pieces. I've got a holster for my drill on my one side, and a magnetic pouch to hold my screws and to hold my anchors. If I do happen to have a couple of different drill bits that I need, I'll keep them in this pouch as well. And I always use quick connect drills so that you can just put a drill bit in, pop it out, put another one in a matter of seconds. I've fallen in love with this ladder. It is very, very lightweight. I particularly bought this one, which is the Gorilla ladders. They are at Home Depot, but you've got a full step here on the third step. You've got a full step for the fourth step. You've got a tray above you, so that when you're going up, it's very easy to maneuver around. It's a little bit narrower, a little bit smaller footprint than what a normal Warner A-frame ladder would be. And as you can see, I can get some pretty good heights with it. It's a full 4 feet at this step. It's not a 4-foot ladder that you're not allowed to step on the top step for. I find this is good for any installation where the finished length of the window treatment is going to be no more than about 115 to 120 inches. Once I start going over 120 inches, I am a shorter installer. I need to pull out a bigger ladder. I'm doing a measure for a model. The designer that is at Elizabeth Coles is working directly with the workroom, who is Alexander's, which is a sister company to Elizabeth Coles.
Love Jeff, one of the best installers I've ever worked with.
I'm giving them measurements from the floor to the top of the window, from the floor to either the crown or the ceiling, depending on if there is crown or ceiling. Typically, what they're going to do is whatever the top height measurement that I give them, they're going to take a 3 to 5 inch deduction and hang the draperies from there. We're pretty standard with the type of hardware that we use. They have 2 main types of hardware that they use. And so with either one of those hardwares, the 3 to 5 inch deduction from whatever the top of the ceiling or the top of the crown is, works. Another essential tool working in a model home. We're bringing a rod from the previous model. This is supposed to be the exact same layout. They have a tendency to sometimes switch windows on us. So we need to make sure that the rod that we took down is going to be wide enough for the rod for the windows that we're putting up. And then we're checking our tag for the treatment that goes in the breakfast area, the kitchen nook area. The 102 1/4 is the mark where the screw is going to go for the bottom of the bracket, so that we always are consistent with the same exact measurement. It's easiest for an installer to measure from where they're going to put the screw at into the bracket rather than where the rod is going to go at. Down here in Houston, we have a lot of hurricane rules and regulations for the building industry. One of the things that pertains to is a lot of the new houses that get built need a metal header. It's a thin piece of metal, but it's still a metal header that goes above the windows. So the only thing that we use in my installation business is a self-tapping. You can see that there's a drill point at the end of my drill bit, or my screw, I'm sorry. And so what I do is I only use this self-tapping type of bit because when I'm going through the drywall, about 50% of the time, the first thing that I hit is a thin plate of metal. So I need to get through that plate of metal. Just a sharp point drywall type screw is not going to go through it. So the drill bit part will go through that. That saves me time. That saves me from having to pre-drill a hole. So it's just economically, even though these screws cost a little bit more, economically with the time it saves for me, definitely money in all of our installations. That's an anchor. I have medium duty anchors, which are what these are. These are just single width panels that are not traversing. So the single width or the medium anchors will do. They'll hold 40 pounds each, so that's 80 pounds per bracket. You'll notice that when I was putting those anchors in, and I did not just drill them straight all the way in, I kind of tapped it in 3 or 4 times. That's to make sure that just because the original hole that I drilled did not hit a stud, if a stud is slightly off, and I just barely missed it, these anchors will catch it and rip the whole wall out. So I do it in short little bursts, so that if I start to feel that I'm hitting a stud, I can stop before I rip the wall apart. On model houses especially, all we're doing is we're going to have a single width panel, so 5 pleats, at each one of the stations in between each window. So what I want to do is I want to make this as secure as possible, as quick as possible, as easy as possible to put up. I don't need to measure how far out I'm going to go with the rod and put my bracket out there so that I'm holding just the last ring. I can have 3 rings or 2 rings on the outside of the window. It doesn't matter, the panels will be stationary. So all I need to do is pleat it accordingly. I know I'm going to have at least one of the pleats inside of the window itself. On any building, on any construction, you're going to have a 2x4 or 2x6 support for the window on each side of the window. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the bracket directly in line about 1 inch out from the edge of the window up to the height that I need it at, which is to the crown molding, so that I hit a stud as I'm putting my anchor in. That way I don't have to worry about putting in an additional anchor. The screw will just go directly into the stud. And as you can tell, I hit a stud. Saves me time. It doesn't affect the final product. It'll look just as well. And it's much more secure than coming out 4 inches, 5 inches, and not hitting a stud and having to use an anchor. Another important fact of a professional installer is every one of your connections that you're going to have to put on, you need to have it, or you should have it, behind a bracket. So that even if it comes apart a little bit like this, once it gets dropped down, you can't see it. You still want to push it together before you leave, but at least it is behind a bracket so that the bracket is going to cover if it ever does work its way slightly open. For your return, I prefer to use a screw. Normally a workroom will have a pin inset along these lines, so that when I would go to hook it back on the screw, I have a chunk of fabric that's either trying to get pushed out or I'm trying to figure out to push it in, and it just doesn't end up working very well and looking right. So I always move the hooks to the outside. I will pinch the hook together so that it's going to catch on my screw head better without pulling off or popping off, having the chance to pop off. and then I just fix the treatment around it. Because this is a model-to-model move over, these treatments have already been hanging, they were already previously steamed. You notice that we took care in folding them and transporting them from the original model over to this model. These treatments do not need to be steamed. However, there are occasions when I'm bringing the treatments directly from the workroom to the model house. I will have some very light steaming to do. The workroom is very good about fan folding. The second thing that we also will do, because I am at new models a week before the furniture arrives, I will leave the bottom of the draperies tied together so that they have that additional week to train. And then when the furniture movers will get here and bring all the furniture in, they'll take my ties off. And so that the treatments are much more trained into their new environment. One other thing to do is always take a step back, because when you're up there, you're putting on your brackets. Everything may seem perfect, may seem great. Take a step back, take a look at your rod. Is the rod level? If you're taking measurements off the floor, if the floor is off, if the crown molding's off, this is when you will see it. This is when you need to make adjustments for that. Also, at this point in time, since I have the treatments on the rod, I'm looking to make sure that my spacing is even between each treatment so that when I leave, these treatments are looking the best that they can. Dining room treatments, the bottom screw will be at 102 1/4, which is what we measured from the last house. And this is going to the crown as well. And again, because these are stationary treatments, I can put my bracket directly in the stud at the edge of the window. One thing to remember about the stud being at the edge of the window is the fact that on this particular treatment, I've got a 1/2 inch sheet of drywall on the inside of the window. So I'm going 1 inch in so that I'm not only clearing that 1/2 inch sheet of drywall, I'm also not catching the edge of the 2x4, 2x6 that they use for the support, but I'm going to catch it more into the middle. If you happen to have a window that has casement around it, so that your casement may come out 3 inches, the placement of the stud has nothing to do with the casement. The casement will be added on top of the drywall, so you still are only going to, from the edge of the window, you're only going to go in about 1 inch, maybe 1.5 inches, and then you'll find your stud directly above. We have the tin sticking out, then I'll reposition. That's better. So what I've done is I put 3 rings on the outside, thinking it could use 3 rings. These 3 pleats are a little bit tight for this size of the window, so I'm going to readjust and take my 3rd ring that's on the outside, put it towards the center, and then respace with a little bit more spacing because we have a very large window here. With attaching the screw for the return, I make sure that the last ring is towards the outside edge of the rod, and I come in directly horizontal or perpendicular to the wall, right at where the drapery pin attaches to the ring. Put the screw in about 3/4 of the way. On that one I did happen to hit a stud, so it is well anchored. I'm going to mark mentally where the treatment hits the screw. So that's where the top of my pin is going to be at. So the same area, I'm going to place the pin, pinch it down so that it is not, normally they're out like that, I'm going to pinch it down so that it attaches to the screw, hook it onto the screw, and then replace the rings where they're supposed to be at. Now I'm going to take a step back and take a look at the treatment and make sure that I like everything. And that side's a little more spaced out, which I do like better. So I'm going to respace this one to match. Sometimes with the box pleated balances, we'll use a T-pin to hold the edges down because they have a tendency to flare out. Other times if the customer, this being a model home, we don't have to worry about it, but sometimes the customer prefers to have a nice crisp edge, in which case I would use a tacking gun and tack these together just so that they're a nice crisp corner.
Standards for drapery fabrication. On this one, they did the side hem first and then overlapped the top. And they blind stitched the buckram down and then fused the first 4 inches at the top. So it just depends on this. This method would allow you to change the length easier than if we had done the top first and then the side hem. Notice the leading edge at the top is only 1.5 inches. When I moved to Houston, I found that this is very common in this area, mainly so that they don't have to put a ring on that edge. If they had left the leading edge at about 3.5, you'd need another ring. And so we found in Houston they just always use the 1.5 inches when they're stationary. Now, if they are an overlapping drapery traversing, it does have the traditional 3.5 inch overlap. Another thing to point out on model construction is, now this one happened to be Blindham, but I do know for a fact that they are now using Dufix on the sides instead of the Blindham, just to speed up the process again. They don't use the highest quality of lining, but it's still a nice lining. This, I believe, is the Econo-Sheen lining, and they don't put a hem in the lining. They just serge along the bottom edge. Again, it's to save time and to save
I
cost.
have a separate pricing for my model installs versus my residential installs. And a balance, all three of those layers are treated separately and charged accordingly. So in finishing up, you need to make sure that you've taken all of your garbage, all of your tools with you, anything that you've brought in, plastic, packaging, everything needs to go with you. You need to shut the lights off, grab all your stuff and your essentials, and head on out the door.